The sound inside the terminal suddenly felt suffocated. Not by the loudspeakers, not by the rolling suitcases gliding across marble floors, but by a strange hush, as if the entire space understood that this moment would be remembered. Gate C-17 at Atlanta Airport buzzed with hurried footsteps, expensive suits, and gleaming watches. Yet within seconds, every eye turned to one spot. To seat 1A. A tall man, salt and pepper hair, cold eyes, a navy blazer stretched across broad shoulders, stopped in the aisle. His voice cut through the cabin, not loud, but sharp as a blade. "You're in the wrong seat, my friend. 1A is mine." First class froze. The man being challenged, David Langston, 40-6, lifted his gaze from his tablet. He wore a plain grey suit, polished but modest shoes, no Rolex, no silk tie. To fellow passengers, he looked like any ordinary businessman, unremarkable and forgettable. David studied the man before him for a long moment, then replied evenly, "This is seat 1A. My boarding pass says so." The man scoffed. Richard Hale, 50-2, a familiar face to Skylux Airline's crew, a platinum tier regular, notorious for being difficult. "I fly this route every month. This seat is always mine. This is my spot." The air thickened, sharp enough to slice. A few passengers began to whisper. A woman forced a polite smile, but her eyes betrayed her anticipation, hungry for spectacle. David did not rush. Calmly, he pulled out his boarding pass, lifting it to Richard's eye level. Black and white. Seat 1A. Name, David Langston. Richard glanced, refused to touch it. Instead of retreating, he jabbed a finger at the empty seat across the aisle. Must be a mix-up. Just sit there. It's no different. David's eyes darkened. He knew this feeling all too well, the sting of being treated as an inconvenience. Yet he did not lash out. Sitting straighter, his voice was quiet but firm. "Are you saying your name is David Langston?" Richard faltered for a beat, then sneered. "I'm Richard Hale. You must not have checked properly. A minor mistake." Murmurs spread. Some looked at David with pity, others with irritation, as if he was disrupting the order of first class. Just then, Melissa Turner, 30-8, the lead flight attendant, stepped in. Her smile was polished by years of training, bright but stiff. "Mr. Hale, is there an issue?" Richard jerked his chin toward David. "This man took my seat." Melissa glanced at the tablet, scanned the boarding pass. A flicker of hesitation, just one breath, but it froze the air solid. Finally, she spoke gently. "Mr. Hale, seat 1A is assigned to Mr. Langston." Richard's smile widened, smug. "Impossible. I always sit in 1A." Melissa turned to David, her tone pleading. "Mr. Langston, would you kindly switch to another seat? We can move you to business class, seat 3D, Mr. Haley is a very loyal customer. This would help keep things smooth." The request landed like a slap. David's eyes narrowed, icy. "Is there a problem with my boarding pass?" Melissa quickly shook her head. "No, sir. Only Mr. Hale is a very important client to Skylux." In that moment, time rolled back 35 years. He was 12, standing beside his 10-year-old brother Aaron, when a gate agent told their mother, "That seat isn't meant for people like you." The scar flared, burning beneath his ribs. He inhaled deeply, then rose to his feet. Every movement slow, heavy, yet exuding a quiet resolve that rippled through the cabin. Richard stepped aside, lips curled in triumph. Melissa whispered, "Thank you for understanding." David said nothing. He dragged his suitcase down the aisle. Eyes followed him, full of pity, contempt, or mere curiosity. A woman tried to offer an apologetic glance, but to him it was nothing more than hollow sympathy. He sank into seat 3D, the fabric worn, legroom cramped, no greeting, no glass of water. While up in first class, champagne flutes clinked, and Richard's laughter mingled with Melissa's. David opened his tablet, but he did not read. His hand rested on his thigh, motionless. His face was cold, expressionless. But inside, a storm brewed. A storm not aimed only at Richard, not only at Melissa, but at a system that had endured too long. A system that saw his presence as nothing but a problem to be removed for convenience. And none of the passengers on that flight knew that the man just displaced from seat 1A was the CEO about to sign a $500 million deal with the power to alter the fate of Skylux Airlines itself. 4 hours later, as the plane's wheels screeched against the runway in New York, the cabin shook gently. The sound of braking, the grind of metal, the collective seek of relief. But to David Langston, all of it was nothing more than background noise to the hollow storm swelling in his chest. He sat still, letting every passenger disembark before him. Only when the cabin was nearly empty did he rise, pulling his suitcase slowly. Each step he took echoed clearly against the cabin floor, like steady knocks on an old door. At the gate, a woman's excited voice rang out. "David! Oh my God, I can't believe it's you!" Clara Donovan, 40, 5, Vice President of Skylux, rushed forward with a radiant smile. Her heels struck the marble in a rapid rhythm, her face glowing, eyes shining as though she had spotted a savior. "My God, I was told you were still in Atlanta. I didn't think I'd see you until next week's board meeting," Clara said, extending her hand. David clasped it firmly, but his eyes did not soften. The handshake was polite and strong, yet empty as a shadow. Behind Clara, Richard Hale emerged from the jet bridge. His smile froze. Blood drained from his face. He stood stiff, watching as Clara, one of Skylux's most powerful executives, greeted the ordinary man he had just pushed out of seat 1A. Clara continued with cheerful oblivion, her words tearing through the fragile silence. "You're the talk of the company right now. Your $500 million deal with Aurora Systems, Skylux, has never had a contract this big." Richard's jaw dropped. He staggered half a step back, as though that sliver of distance could shield him from the storm approaching. Melissa Turner stood farther away, her cheeks paling as the truth dawned. David turned to Clara with a faint smile, polite yet frigid. "About that contract, Clara, I've changed my mind." Clara's expression shattered in an instant. "You? What do you mean?" "It's simple," David replied, his deep voice carrying across the crowded concourse. "I won't be signing it." He released her hand, pulled his suitcase, and walked away, leaving Clara frozen in place. Richard's breath came fast, his eyes trailing David like a man watching his own future vanish into a shadow. News spread like wildfire. Within hours, Skylux's Manhattan headquarters was in turmoil. 2 internal meetings cancelled, an emergency press briefing postponed, even a luncheon with the senator's aide scrapped. Clara sat alone in her glass-walled office, staring at the dark laptop screen. Her voice cracked in a whisper. $500 million? Gone? Her young assistant hesitated at the door. He won't take your calls. That's 4 times now, ma'am. Clara snapped the pen in her grip, plastic breaking with a sharp crack. Bring Richard in, now. Minutes later, Richard entered. Gone was his confident stride, replaced by meek, clumsy steps. Clara raised her head, her eyes like knives. You didn't tell me that you confronted David Langston on that flight, Richard stammered, tugging at his blazer. I didn't know who he was. How could I have guessed? I just thought... Careful. Clara cut him off, her voice low, each word a nail driven in. You thought he didn't look like someone who belonged in 1A. Is that what you're trying to say? Richard's throat closed. Sweat broke across his brow. Clara stood, turned toward the window, gazing down at Manhattan's glittering streets. Her voice dropped, colder than winter wind. You just insulted the man holding Skylux's future in his hands. Do you have any idea what you've done? Richard said nothing. His head bowed, his shoulders trembled, and in his eyes, for the first time, flickered true fear. Meanwhile, in a quiet penthouse overlooking Central Park, David sat at the kitchen counter, a steaming cup of black coffee beside a pile of documents. He did not read them. He had read them 100 times already. His phone buzzed, for the 6th time in an hour. The name on the screen. Michael Grant, his legal counsel and longtime friend. David answered. Michael's voice rasped with urgency. David, you've just set off an earthquake. Wall Street is going insane. You know that, right? David sipped his coffee, his voice steady and low. I didn't do anything, Mike. I just refused to sign a contract. Michael let out a dry laugh. People don't call that just. 6 months of negotiations, 3 site visits, dozens of NDAs, and you walk away right after stepping off a flight. Do you understand you just pushed Skylux to the brink? David was silent. In that silence, only the sound of wind rustled through the window pane. Then he spoke slowly. I know. Michael exhaled heavily. Then at least tell me, why? Was it because of what happened on the plane? David set down his cup, staring into his reflection on the black marble countertop. His gaze was dark, bottomless. No, Mike, not just because of that. He paused, his hand tightening into a fist. This has followed me since I was 12. As night fell over Manhattan, the lights of glass towers carved cold streaks across the sky. In a quiet penthouse, David Langston sat silently by the window. Below him, the city pulsed with life, but inside him, there was only the echo of memory. The past rushed back, so vivid it suffocated. He was 12 then. Aaron was 10. The 2 brothers carried small suitcases, dressed in crisp white shirts, their eyes shining with excitement for their very first flight to Los Angeles to visit their aunt. Their mother carefully folded the tickets, tucked them into a leather sleeve, and approached the check in counter with a trusting smile. But in seconds, that smile vanished. The agent behind the counter leaned down, his voice flat. "The flight is full. You'll have to come back tomorrow." Their mother produced tickets, a confirmation, even an explanation. But all she got in return was a cold shake of the head. And then, a white family of 4 stepped forward, holding identical tickets. The agent's demeanor transformed, suddenly warm, welcoming, printing new boarding passes for them, opening the gate wide. David would never forget Aaron's eyes, wet with tears, staring at the family walking through, before turning to him and asking, "David, what did we do wrong?" His heart clenched, as if someone was crushing it from the inside. That was the first time he realized silence could kill a child. The silence of powerlessness, of humiliation, of knowing you had a right stripped away in plain sight. 35 years had passed, but that memory never faded. It hid behind every polite smile, every billion-dollar contract, every boardroom debate. And tonight, after what had happened on the flight, it surged back more violently than ever. David placed his hand on the cold surface of the table and whispered to his reflection, "History doesn't repeat itself. It never disappeared." While he wrestled between past and present, the world outside was erupting. A passenger on Skylux 218, a student named Olivia Carter, 24, unrelated by blood, just a shared surname, had quietly snapped a blurry photo. David, sitting alone in seat 3D, eyes staring into the void. She posted it on Twitter with the caption, "Just saw a black man forced out of seat 1A to keep the flight smooth." He didn't protest, just silently moved. Hours later, I learned he's the CEO of a major tech corporation. The post spread like wildfire. The hashtag #firstclass. For some appeared, climbing to the top of trending within hours. Under the images, thousands of stories poured out. A former flight attendant anonymously confessed, "We were quietly trained that first class must have the right look." No one said it, but everyone understood what that meant. A former passenger wrote, "I was once downgraded because I was traveling with my grandmother, who they decided wasn't appropriate for premium service." The words cut like blades, slicing into Skylux's reputation. In the glass-lit conference rooms of headquarters, Clara Donovan held her head in her hands, eyes bruised from exhaustion. Screens displayed hundreds of posts, videos, and accusations. Melissa Turner was summoned, sitting stiff before the HR panel. Her hands shredded a tissue to pieces, her voice breaking. I thought I was doing what was best for the flight." He never complained. "I thought I handled it right." The HR director cut her off, slow but sharp. "Right for whom, Melissa? Right for the company or right for justice?" Melissa's mouth fell silent. In her mind, the image replayed endlessly. David rising, walking past the pitying eyes of the cabin. Across the city, David's phone rang non-stop. Journalists, networks, radio stations, all desperate for an interview. But he refused. He chose silence. And it was that silence that sent the public into a frenzy. Because the silence of an ordinary man could be ignored. But the silence of David Langston, a billionaire tech founder, the creator of Aurora Systems, was an accusation in itself. In a small bar in Queens, a group of young engineers debated, "He hasn't said a word. But that's exactly why Skylux is shaking." Exactly. Because everyone knows, if he does speak, it won't just be about a seat. It'll be an indictment. In the sea of outrage, a handwritten letter arrived at David's penthouse. No signature. The handwriting trembling. What you did wasn't just rejecting a contract. You held up a mirror to all of us, and I didn't like what I saw. Thank you. David held the letter in silence for a long time. Then he placed it into a drawer where other envelopes already lay. From strangers, anonymous airline employees, even a flight attendant from that very day. The words differed, but the meaning was always the same. I saw. I didn't stop it. I'm sorry. He closed the drawer, walked to the wooden shelf, and touched the framed photo of his family. 2 boys, David and Aaron, smiling brightly, backpacks slung over their shoulders, standing in front of an airport. That day, they never boarded their flight. Aaron had died 10 years ago in a police encounter in Mississippi. That wrongful death carved the truth deeper. Money, power, success. None of it could save a black man from the weight of prejudice. David's hand trembled against the frame. Aaron, this time, I won't stay silent. Outside, social media continued to rage. But inside the quiet penthouse, a storm had finally taken shape. 3 days later, Manhattan was drenched in gray rain. The streets shimmered, reflecting neon lights, while yellow taxis darted through the storm like arrows. High above, in a glass tower, inside a sprawling penthouse, David Langston sat motionless at a long black stone table. In front of him were 2 thick dossiers, bound tightly with coarse rope. Michael Grant, his longtime friend and attorney, had just placed them down. His voice was low, raspy, tired. You asked me to find everything. This is everything. 11 years. 30. 7 internal complaints. Most buried quietly. Some settled. All suffocated beneath paperwork and NDAs. David did not rush to open them. His eyes lingered on the dossiers as if they were coffins. Inside lay the corpses of silenced voices, employees, flight attendants, pilots, people who had spoken up only to be forced into silence to preserve Skylux's image. Michael sat across from him, lighting a cigarette but not smoking it, letting the flame burn and die. He looked at his friend and shook his head. Are you sure you want to do this, David? This isn't just a company. This is an industry. If you blow it open, there's no going back. David answered softly, eyes still fixed on the dossiers. Mike, I've lived in silence too long. It's time to let the truth speak for itself. He opened the first file. The first page was a long spreadsheet. The numbers were dry, but beneath each line was a life. Complaint 07-12-2016. Flight attendant denied promotion. Complaint 11-03-2018. Black passenger downgraded without reason. Complaint 605-2019. Pilot resigned after 14 months due to discrimination. David flipped a few more pages, then stopped. On one sheet, the signature of a female employee. I witnessed a colleague humiliated in front of passengers. I reported it, but management told me, "Don't make more trouble." He placed his hand over the words, fingers trembling slightly, as though he could hear a voice strangled in some hidden room. Wind whistled against the glass windows of the penthouse. Rain hammered down in rhythm with his heavy breath. Michael broke the silence. "So what's your plan? Release all of this to the public? The press will call it revenge. They'll say you threw away $500 million just to bring down an airline. They'll brand you David Langston, the saboteur." David raised his head. His eyes glowed with a strange fire. "I don't need them to see me as a hero. I just need them to see the truth. For years, this system has survived on silence. If I break that silence, I've already won half the battle." Michael studied him for a long time, then gave a dry laugh. "You've never played small, David. But brace yourself. This wave is enormous." David closed the file, stood up, and walked towards the window. He looked out at the storm-shrouded city. In the glass reflection, his figure merged with the lightning outside. A thought struck, clearer than ever. This was never about a seat. This was a fracture in the entire system. At the same time, at Skylux headquarters, the crisis ballooned. The communications office overflowed with calls, complaint emails, reporters at the gates. Clara Donovan pressed her temples, eyes locked on screens flooded with hashtags. Hashed first class. For some, Seat 1A, or silent discrimination. In an internal hearing room, Melissa Turner sat under harsh fluorescent light that revealed every crack in her composure. A manager grilled her. "Why did you ask Mr. Langston to move seats?" Melissa's lips quivered. "Mr. Hale, he's a frequent flyer. I thought if we refused, he'd complain, write letters, cause trouble for the flight. I just wanted everything smooth." A cold voice cut in. "Smooth for whom, Melissa? For the flight? For Skylux? Or for Mr. Hale?" Melissa bowed her head. Tears welled. In her mind, the image of David rising from seat 1A replayed again and again. Not angry, not vengeful, only a silence so heavy it suffocated. That silence had now become the tidal wave drowning the company. Late at night, David still had not slept. He sat at his desk, fingers brushing over an old photo of Aaron. His younger brother at 10, in a striped shirt, smiling brightly, eyes filled with hope. David closed his eyes and whispered, "Little brother, this time I won't let them steal your voice. Not yours, not anyone's." He opened his laptop, entered his password, and the screen lit up. Michael's files were now scanned and digitized. The cursor hovered over a folder labeled Skylux Complaints, Confidential. Without hesitation, he dragged them into a secured, encrypted email. Subject line, "For transparency." Recipient, Camille Ortega, a veteran journalist at the New York Ledger. He paused for a single second, then hit send. The glow of the screen lit his face. It was no longer silence. It was the beginning of a storm fiercer than any rain outside. The next day, the New York Ledger published Seat 1A, The Price of Dignity in American Business. The article did not just recount David's story. It exposed an entire system. Each number, each testimony, each buried complaint was a hammer blow against the false wall Skylux had built for decades. And for the first time, the public no longer saw David as just a billionaire, but as a mirror, a mirror reflecting the raw truth. Fairness in seating, in service, in life had never been equally shared. The article in the New York Ledger was like a spark falling into a fuel tank. Within 24 hours, over 5 million reads. In the next 24 hours, that number doubled. Countless publications, from the Wall Street Journal to personal blogs, reprinted the story under the same headline, Seat 1A. On television, a financial network ran a breaking update. The CEO of Aurora Systems' decision to walk away from a $500 million contract is sending Skylux shares down nearly 9% today. This is not just an economic shock, it is an indictment of corporate culture. In a small cafe in Brooklyn, off-duty flight attendants crowded around a screen. One young worker exclaimed, "He didn't need to shout. Just one refusal to sign, and he shook the entire company." An older colleague nodded. That is the highest form of retaliation, not with anger, but by forcing the world to see their true face. Meanwhile, at Skylux headquarters in Manhattan, hallways once buzzing were now eerily silent. Executives kept their heads down. Phones rang incessantly. Behind closed boardroom doors, Clara Donovan stood before a projection screen, her voice raw after sleepless nights. "We need to handle communications immediately. A public apology. Train staff. Launch a diversity program. Anything." Another executive cut in. "Not enough. This isn't PR anymore. This is a cultural wave. People are resurfacing long-forgotten stories. And each story is another knife cut into Skylux." Clara froze. Her eyes seemed hollow, as if realizing for the first time that the true enemy was not David, nor the contract, but the system itself. In another office, Richard Hale sat alone, jacket draped over his chair, his face haggard. He muttered to himself as though pleading, "I didn't know who he was. How could I have known?" But even he understood that the excuse was meaningless, because even if David had not been a CEO, his actions were still an insult. And that truth was eroding the dignity Richard had spent 20 years building. While Skylux reeled in chaos, David chose stillness. He refused interviews, wrote no articles, posted nothing on social media. Silence. But silence by design. In his apartment, he sat before a wooden table, eyes fixed on Aaron's photo. His brother's voice from years past echoed, "Brother David, did we do something wrong?" David whispered softly, "No, Aaron. It was never our fault. The fault was in this system. And this time, I will show the world." The phone rang. Michael Grant's voice on the line was heavy. "They're preparing to strike back. Skylux has hired PR teams, lawyers, media specialists. They'll spin this as an unfortunate misunderstanding. They'll blame a few individuals and bury the root. Are you planning to respond?" David leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed. "I won't speak through the press. I'll speak where those words will have no choice but to echo." Michael hesitated. "You mean?" David opened his eyes, steel in his gaze. "The National Aviation Forum next week. They invited me as a technology partner. I'll be there, and I'll speak." On the day of the forum, the Grand Hall in Washington, D.C. blazed with lights. Over 1,000 people, airline executives, federal regulators, international journalists, filled every seat. All came expecting forecasts about new technology. None anticipated an earthquake. When the MC announced, "Please welcome Mr. David Langston, CEO of Aurora Systems," the hall erupted in applause. David walked to the podium. No tie, just a simple dark blue suit. He stood tall, scanning the audience. For several seconds, he said nothing. The silence tightened the air across 1,000 anxious faces. Then his voice rang out, low and steady. "I am not here to talk about technology. I am here to talk about a seat." The hall froze. David continued. Seat 1A on a flight, something seemingly trivial, revealed what many of us know, but choose silence over. That in this system, some people are presumed to belong, while others are treated as unfit, regardless of their rights or what they have paid. He paused, took a deep breath. Aaron's image flashed in his mind. His voice wavered, but held firm. At 12 years old, I lost a seat because of my skin color. At 46, I lost it again, even as I was about to sign a $500 million deal. But today I stand here not to demand a seat for myself. I stand here to demand it for everyone who has ever been forced to walk away in silence. The air in the hall thickened. Some lowered their heads. Some eyes brimmed with tears. David fixed his gaze on the row where Skylux's leaders sat. His voice thundered. "This is not revenge. This is balance. And if this system refuses to change, then we, the people in this very room, will force it to change." He lowered the microphone. The hall fell into an absolute silence, but not the silence of shame. It was the silence of awakening. David stepped down from the stage, his stride steady, leaving behind faces still frozen in shock. That night, the video of his speech spread across the globe. No sensational headline, just a simple caption. David Langston, Seat 1A. And millions of people, from small airports in the south to financial towers worldwide, understood that this was no longer one man's story. It was a declaration of war against an Atul culture. The video of David Langston's speech spread beyond control. Overnight, it reached more than 10 million views, appearing across every platform from Twitter to LinkedIn. It was not because it was long, nor because it was flashy. On the contrary, it was its simplicity. A man standing alone, recounting a painful memory, and declaring plainly, "I am not seeking revenge. I am restoring balance." That struck a hidden wound shared by millions. In airport lounges across America, employees replayed the clip. Some sat in silence, others nodded. In places where first class had long been an untouchable symbol, new whispers arose. He dared to say it, and he said it for all of us. While public outrage erupted, the real earthquake began inside Skylux headquarters. The 45th floor boardroom was suffocating with the stench of stale coffee and invisible pressure. Clara Donovan stood before the projection screen, her face haggard, her voice tense. "We lost another 12% of our stock value this morning. 3 major investors are demanding face-to-face meetings, and legal counsel says a group of former employees is preparing a class action lawsuit." No one in the room spoke. Every gaze was averted, as if truth would vanish if they refused to face it. The door swung open. A nervous assistant stammered, The press is swarming downstairs. They want an official statement. And Richard Hale, the media is calling him the man of seat 1A. The room erupted. Clara slammed her pen down, her voice slicing through clenched teeth. "Bring him in." Minutes later, Richard Hale entered. Gone was the polished air of a VIP frequent flyer. He looked 10 years older in just a week. His suit was rumpled, tie loosened. He tried to smile, but it trembled, twisted. "Clara, I can explain." Clara's eyes burned. "You don't need to explain to me. You need to explain to the entire industry, to the world, why you believed you had more right than another passenger just because you always sit in 1A. Richard's face drained pale, his body recoiling. I didn't know who he was." Clara stepped closer, her voice low but sharp. "That is exactly the problem, Richard. You didn't know, and you still decided. You judged with your eyes, and that judgment is now burning Skylux to the ground." Richard bowed his head, his hand shaking. In that instant, the arrogance that once made him a tyrant of the first class cabin vanished, leaving only a man consumed by the weight of his mistake. In another office, Melissa Turner sat before a disciplinary panel. Harsh lights glared down on white walls. She clenched her hands together, her voice hoarse. "I just thought, if I didn't give the seat to Mr. Hale, the flight would fall into chaos. I wanted to keep things smooth." A board member shot back. "Smooth for whom, Melissa? For the customer, or for those you believed were more important?" Tears welled as Melissa lowered her head. She saw again David rising from his seat, eyes calm, no anger, no resistance, just silence as he walked away. A silence that terrified her more than any scream. And now, that silence had become a sentence hanging over her. While Skylux spiraled into turmoil, across the city, David lived his routine. He walked through Central Park in the mornings, stopped at his small, familiar cafe, read the paper like an ordinary man. Yet every eye followed him. Some approached timidly. "Mr. Langston, I just want to say thank you. Because of you, I told my story, and I no longer feel alone." David nodded, a faint smile flickering before fading. He had never sought to be a symbol, but the story had slipped beyond his control, turning him into the face of a movement to reclaim the voices of those long forced to the margins in silence. Michael Grant called, his voice weighted with concern. "David, you've become the center now. They're calling you the man of seat 1A. Papers are debating. Are you a hero or a saboteur? Some CEOs praise you. Others say you're exploiting pain to exert pressure. Do you want to respond?" Sitting in his office, David's eyes rested on Aaron's photo. His voice was steady. "I don't need to argue. If they see me as a hero, they will excuse the system. If they see me as a saboteur, they will dodge the truth. Both are wrong. I don't need medals. I don't need infamy. I need change." He turned his chair toward the window, gazing at the endless stream of traffic below. His heartbeat pounded steady like a war drum. "And if I have to go further to force that change, I will." That evening's news broadcast announced, "Skylux Airlines confirms Mr. Richard Hale has resigned from the Customer Advisory Council. Chief Purser Melissa Turner has been suspended. The company pledges to review all service policies." The statement echoed, But the public was unmoved. People no longer trusted empty apologies. Hashtags still flooded the feeds. And in places far and wide, from a mechanic's shop in Texas to an airport lounge in Tokyo, people whispered the story of Seat 1A as a new symbol of defiance. That night, David sat alone again in his apartment, thick files from Michael spread before him. He had not read them all, but he knew the truth was there. Not just 30, 7 complaints, but a panorama of a rotted system. He inhaled deeply, eyes blazing. It is time to not just speak. It is time to act. He picked up the phone, called Michael. His voice rang clear and resolute. "Mike, get everything ready. I want every file on Skylux. Recruitment, promotions, complaints, all of it. We will not stop at Seat 1A. We are taking down the system." And from that moment, the storm was no longer silent. It had been unleashed. 3 weeks after the speech, the entire US aviation industry felt as if it was strapped to a plane shaking violently in the middle of a storm. Each day, another old story resurfaced. Each hour, another piece of evidence leaked. And at the center of that storm was one name: David Langston. From his penthouse overlooking Central Park, David quietly observed the waves he had set into motion. On his desk, the pile of documents towered like a mountain: recruitment reports, payroll records, internal complaints, all gathered by Michael Grant. Each page was a crack, and when pieced together, the image appeared. A decades-long system of discrimination hidden beneath a deliberate silence. Michael sat across from him, his voice raspy from sleepless nights. "David, we have enough to bring them down. But you must consider, going this far means declaring war. There's no turning back." David placed his hand on the stack, his eyes burning with a quiet fire. "I am not searching for a way back anymore, Mike. It is time the world understood this was never just an accident on a flight, but a disease buried deep within the system." The next day, the New York Ledger launched a special investigative series. The headline blazed, "Behind the Curtain, the Truth Inside Skylux." The front page showed the numbers: 37 complaints, 11 years, most suppressed. A former flight attendant confessed, "We were told to maintain an image of suitability in first class. No one defined what suitable meant, but everyone knew." A black engineer revealed, "I was passed over for promotion 3 times. When I asked why, management laughed and said, 'You're great for technical work, but to lead clients requires a different image.'" Each testimony was a knife. The entire industry staggered. At Skylux headquarters, Clara Donovan held an emergency meeting with executives. Her face was drawn, her voice hoarse. "We are no longer dealing with an incident. This is an indictment, and David Langston is turning it into a movement." A finance director slammed the table. "He won't stop. He wants to bury Skylux. We need to strike back." But even as they argued, stock fell another 7%. Customers cancelled flights. Competitors launched a campaign, "Every seat counts," a direct strike at the heart of Skylux's brand. Meanwhile, Richard Hale lived in shadows. Reporters surrounded his home. Business contacts cut ties. He stared into the mirror at a stranger's face, pale, exhausted, stripped of pride. His excuse, "I didn't know who he was," had become a punchline online, remixed into thousands of memes. Once a powerful VIP, Richard had become the symbol of arrogance and blind entitlement. Melissa Turner fared no better. Suspended, summoned to hearings, she sat in an empty room, white light bearing down, her hands cold as ice. The image of David rising from seat 1A, walking silently past pitying eyes, replayed endlessly in her mind. She whispered to herself, "I didn't want trouble, but I became the trouble." And David, though he gave no interviews, still became a torch. Universities invited him to lecture. Economic forums begged him to speak. But he declined almost all. He did not want stardom. He only chose places where real change could be sparked. One evening, Camille Ortega, the journalist who had first interviewed him, visited his office. No cameras, no lights, just a notebook. She asked, "Do you know you're becoming a symbol?" David sipped his black coffee, his tone calm. "Symbols last a season. I don't care about seasons. I care about legacy." Camille leaned forward, eyes sharp with curiosity. "So what will you do next?" David was silent for a long moment. Then he set the cup down, his voice low and cutting. "It's time to go beyond Skylux. I want to reach the entire industry. I want to force them to change from the roots, and I already have a plan." 2 days later, Aurora Systems released an official announcement. Aurora will partner with rival airlines to deploy Justice by Design, a transparent monitoring system logging every decision on seating, hiring, promotions, with independent audits every month. The news shook the industry. One major competitor signed immediately. Skylux remained silent. But silence now was no longer composure. It was confession. In his apartment, David stood alone at the window. Below, New York flowed like a river of light. He whispered as if to Aaron, "We've started it. Now let's see who still dares to take another person's seat." The night wind swept in, carrying the sound of a city in transformation. And this time, David knew. This was no longer just his story. It was a battle beyond his hands, but one he would lead to the very end. The New York sky hung heavy, grey clouds pressing down as if weighing on the very roof of Skylux Airlines. Inside the towering glass headquarters, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. The long room, walled in glass, felt as suffocating as a dungeon. Clara Donovan sat at the head of the table, her face pale, dark circles under her eyes, telling the story of sleepless nights. Around her, the executives split into clear factions. One demanded a public apology and sweeping reforms. The other insisted on retaliation, flooding media with money, discrediting David Langston at all costs. A man's voice rose, brimming with fury. "Are we really letting one man drag this entire corporation by the nose? He refused to sign. Now he wants to drag the whole industry into the mud. We must hit back, hire lawyers, smear him." Another executive slammed the table. "Can't you see? The public no longer believes those tricks. Any lie now will only sink us deeper. The only way forward is transformation. If not, Skylux will become a walking corpse." Clara listened, her hands clasped tightly. She knew this was no longer about a seat on a plane. This was a war, to reclaim trust. And trust could not be bought with advertising dollars. Finally, her voice cut through, low but firm. We do not have much time. If we do not decide now, Skylux will collapse before the next flight takes off. While the board argued, the outside world was imploding. A national broadcast aired an exclusive documentary, The Silence in First Class. Former employees described being forced into silence. Customers shared stories of being downgraded, and even a former pilot, speaking anonymously, revealed, "We were told that first class must project the right image. It was never said outright. But everyone knew what that meant." The country trembled. Social media ignited. Personal stories flooded in, no longer a scattering of hashtags, but a tidal wave. A former attendant wrote, "I stayed silent when I witnessed it. But silent is no longer an option." In his luxury apartment, David followed everything with calm eyes. He posted nothing, said nothing. He only sat at his desk, Aaron's photo in front of him. His fingers brushed the glass as he whispered, "We're doing it, Aaron. But it's not enough." Michael Grant entered, arms heavy with new reports. His voice was low, urgent. "The Skylux board is breaking apart. One side wants reform. The other wants to fight you. This is the moment. How do you want to strike next?" David lifted his gaze. There was no anger in his eyes, only the steady certainty of a man who had chosen a road with no return. "We will show them the truth. No more hiding, no more compromise. I want every piece of Skylux's recruitment data made public." Michael froze. "Do you realize how big of an explosion that will cause? This isn't just one airline. This is the entire industry. If you do this, you will make enemies of powerful people." David nodded slightly, a bitter smile crossing his lips. Better to be their enemy than betray Aaron's memory. The next day, Aurora Systems released a second press statement. It was brief, but it detonated like a bomb. Aurora publishes an analysis of Skylux Airlines' internal data, revealing that 78% of discrimination complaints over the past 11 years were dismissed without review. This is not an incident. This is a system. Just a few lines, yet the echo spread like wildfire. Newspapers roared, "Skylux in crisis, a decade of buried truths." The headquarters sat atop a volcano. Stock prices plunged. Major shareholders began to sell. Rival airlines rushed to sign contracts with Aurora to implement justice by design. Each new agreement was a blade driven deeper into Skylux. Clara sat in her office, head in her hands. On her desk lay Richard Hale's resignation, signed hastily in the night, leaving no room for excuses. In another corner, the HR report stated plainly, Melissa Turner was officially terminated. Clara raised her eyes to the Manhattan skyline. The city still glowed brightly, but to her it looked like a battlefield. She knew the only path left was to face the truth head on. But did she have the strength to turn the sinking ship? That evening, in a small Brooklyn cafe, a group of young engineers followed the news on their phones. One chuckled softly. He didn't just cancel a contract, he's rewriting the rules. Another nodded. This isn't about seat 1A anymore. This is about every seat, and no one can avoid it now. In his apartment, David closed his laptop and sat quietly by the window. The city below buzzed with life, but inside him there was only silence. He knew this was just the beginning. Ahead lay a brutal war. He whispered, as if to Aaron, "We've cracked them. Now it's time to make them change." And from the darkness, a bolt of lightning split the sky, like a herald of the storm still to come. One May morning, the gleaming glass tower of Skylux Airline's headquarters in Midtown became a symbol of chaos. Hallways, once buzzing with life, now stood silent as a graveyard. Employees passed each other with lowered eyes, stripped of the forced smiles that once masked the tension. In the grand boardroom, where $100 million deals had once been struck, only half the seats were filled. The rest sat empty, silent as an unspoken indictment. At the head of the table, Clara Donovan tapped her pen against the glass, the sharp, dry sound echoing like a judge's gavel. Skylux's stock had lost more than 30% of its value. Rival airlines had openly partnered with David Langston's Aurora systems. On television, analysts called it the migration of trust. Major shareholders were pulling their capital. A wave of class action lawsuits had been filed in federal court. Clara raised her head, her voice raw. "We are no longer facing a threat. We are in full crisis." A director sighed, pulling a white envelope from his pocket and placing it on the table. A resignation letter. Then another followed, and another. The rustle of paper filled the room, each sheet like the closing of a coffin lid. Clara stared at the envelopes, her eyes bloodshot. She knew it was not only the company collapsing, but also the career she had spent a lifetime building, crumbling piece by piece. In his apartment, David watched from afar. He no longer needed to intervene. Skylux was collapsing under the weight of its own silence. Yet there was no joy in his eyes, only exhaustion, only a profound sadness. Michael Grant arrived carrying a stack of newspapers. The front page of the Financial Daily screamed in bold, "Skylux on the edge. Langston's refusal sparks industry reckoning." Michael dropped the stack onto the table and fell into a chair. "You've done it, David. They're truly falling apart. But I have to ask, what now? Do you keep pressing until Skylux is ashes, or do you stop here?" David quietly picked up the paper, his eyes lingering on a candid photo of himself leaving the aviation forum. He stared for a long moment, then set it down, his voice low. "I don't want to destroy them, but I won't save them either. This was never just about Skylux. This is about an entire system." Michael nodded, though worry flickered in his eyes. He knew David was walking a fine line, from a symbol of justice. He could easily become branded as a destroyer. Across Manhattan, Clara Donovan sat alone in her office. Streetlights cast shifting shadows on the wall. On her desk lay the latest HR report. The new Director of Diversity and Inclusion, a woman who had once sued Skylux for discrimination. Clara felt her chest tighten. Years ago, she had voted to reject that claim. Closing her eyes, she whispered, "We should have changed when we had the chance." She realized that among all the excuses, what she feared most was not losing her chair, but the truth that Skylux had built its reputation by silencing voices like David's, like Aaron's, like thousands of others. And now, truth had come back to collect its debt. In a cafe in New Jersey, Melissa Turner sat across from her cousin, a high school teacher. Melissa had lost her job, branded online as the flight attendant of Seat 1A. She stirred her coffee endlessly without drinking. Her cousin asked quietly, "Did they fire you?" Melissa nodded. The short answer carried unbearable weight. Her cousin sighed, eyes a mix of pity and reproach. "Did you ever wonder why you didn't see that he deserved 1A from the start?" Melissa bit her lip, her eyes brimming. "I did see, but I was afraid. I was afraid of trouble. I thought silence was safe. But I was wrong. I was the trouble." Meanwhile, David continued to receive handwritten letters. Some came from anonymous attendants, others from technicians, even from passengers who had witnessed it all. Every message carried the same truth. "I saw. I did nothing. I am sorry." One evening, David opened a special envelope. Inside was a short note. "You didn't just refuse a contract. You rewrote the rules. And you gave people like me the belief that we are no longer alone." He folded the letter and placed it into the drawer already full of others like it. Then his eyes lifted to Aaron's photo. The fire within him blazed brighter than the city lights outside. "Brother, we are not stopping here. We will go further, so no one ever has to ask again, what did we do wrong?" The next day, David officially announced a new project under Aurora Systems, MJC Labs, named for Malcolm James Carter. Their first software was not designed to increase revenue, but to monitor fairness in every corporate decision: hiring, promotions, service allocations. Not to punish individuals, but to expose systemic patterns. The news shook the business world. Media called it the death blow to companies surviving on silence. Corporations scrambled to contact Aurora, eager to partner before being exposed. At the launch event, David spoke only one line: "We cannot change the past, but we can design the future." Skylux heard the news and fell into absolute silence. But everyone understood. This silence was no longer patience. It was a final confession. 1 year later, the May winds swept once again across Georgia. In a small cemetery on the outskirts of Atlanta, shaded by old oak trees, the red earth carried the scent of wildflowers. Among the rows of headstones, David Langston walked slowly. He brought no roses, no lavish wreaths. In his hand he carried only a small bronze plaque. He stopped at his mother's grave. Beside it stood the marker of Aaron James Langston, 1980-2015. David placed the plaque down, his hand trembling as he brushed it gently. The words gleamed: "Full scholarship in aviation and engineering for first-generation students, in memory of Aaron." David lowered himself onto the grass, sitting in silence for a long time. The wind rustled through the trees as if answering from the past. At last he whispered, "Brother, we reclaimed the seat. Not just for me, but for everyone who was ever pushed out. You are not here to see it, but this legacy carries your name." He rested his hand on the headstone and closed his eyes. A single tear fell, soaking into the soil. Meanwhile, in New York, the Skylux headquarters stood colder than ever. Half the board had resigned. Shares were in freefall. In the empty boardroom, Clara Donovan sat alone, staring down at the bustling streets below. She had tried to save the vessel, but the storm was too fierce. On her desk lay the final report. Skylux loses its position as the leading airline, surpassed by competitors within 12 months. Clara inhaled deeply, a bitter smile curving her lips. She knew Skylux would not vanish overnight, but from here on, it was only a shadow of itself, a name forever bound to collapse, arrogance, and silence. At Columbia University, David appeared not as a billionaire, but as a guest speaker. The classroom was arranged in a circle, no podium, no slides. Only young students with eyes lit by hope, and a man who had once refused a $500 million contract. A student asked, "Do you regret it, losing such a massive deal?" David smiled softly and shook his head. "I don't regret saying no. I only regret that it took me so long to finally say it." Another student pressed, "But if you had signed, couldn't you have changed things from within? You already had the power." David looked directly at them, his voice steady but sharp. "That is the greatest illusion. People tell you that if you are quiet enough, successful enough, rich enough, eventually you will be heard. But change doesn't come from waiting for an invitation to the table. Change comes when you refuse to stay seated in silence any longer." The room fell silent. But this time it was a different silence. The silence of understanding, of respect. Months later, at the inauguration of Aurora Systems' new office in Washington, D.C., David cut the ribbon. On the grand lobby wall were not portraits of investors, but images of those once overlooked who had risen. A janitor who became a manager, an immigrant girl who rose to head of technology, a poor student who created the company's first AP. At the end of the row, with no silver frame, no title, just an old photograph of a 10-year-old boy in a baseball cap, smiling brightly. Aaron. David stood before it for a long time. Michael Grant stepped up beside him, handing him a glass of wine. "You truly did it, David. All of this, from silence." David raised his glass, his voice solemn. "No, Mike. Not from silence, but from what silence could no longer contain." On Aaron's 45th birthday, David returned to the cemetery. No flowers, no press, no applause. Only him, seated on the grass, gazing at the blue sky. He whispered, "They've taken the word priority off seat 1A, brother. No airline dares to call it a privilege anymore. And your name has become a scholarship for those who were once like us." The wind stirred, leaves rustling in reply. David pressed his hand against the gravestone, his eyes shining with a calm conviction. "You never sat in first class, but now you have an entire generation sitting there for you. And we have won, Aaron." He remained still, letting the afternoon sun wash over his shoulders. In the distance, the roar of an airplane echoed across the sky. But this time, it was not the sound of distance or loss. It was the sound of a new journey, a journey where every seat and every person would be respected the same. And so the story closed, not with the collapse of an airline, but with the beginning of a legacy. A reminder that justice is not a privilege, but a right. And sometimes, all it takes is one person daring to stand up, and the entire world is forced to change. David Langston's story has ended, but its echo still lingers. From a seat unjustly taken, he turned humiliation into fire, refused silence, and forced an entire system to confront itself. The lesson here is not just for the airline industry. It is for all of us. Anyone who has ever witnessed injustice and wondered whether their voice carried enough weight. As an expert, I can affirm this. True power does not lie in a $500 million contract, nor in a first-class seat. Power lies in the moment we choose not to bow our heads, when we decide that silence is no longer an option. That is when one individual becomes the catalyst for collective change. And now, the question is no longer about David. It is about you. If one day you are forced out of your own seat, in your work, in society, in life, will you choose to walk away in swoons, or will you stand tall and let the truth be heard? If this story has made you reflect, hit like to help spread its message, subscribe so you won't miss the journeys to come, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. What will you do when it is your turn to face injustice? Because sometimes, changing the whole world begins with the very seat others thought you did not deserve to sit in.